How's it going, everybody? Quick housekeeping, as usual. All right. So, interesting thing I realized today, and this wasn't. I'm not some brilliant. Didn't have some brilliant insight that nobody else had. Like it was. This is a thought that a lot of people have been putting out there, but I think it's incredibly compelling. So one of the things I want to say is I really don't like conspiracy theories. I really don't. But I do like elegant explanations of things that aren't conspiratorial, but rather are simple. Provide a simple explanation of existing facts that don't require people to be conniving behind the scenes. So when I did Checkmate on Robert Mueller and talked about how I think that Bill Barr and how Bill Barr became Attorney General and why they sought him out, I was very much trying. Periscope is just messing with audio right now. I don't know what to tell you guys. If the audio is low, I'll try and speak loudly, but that's just, I mean, our people can literally, okay. I can't deal with it. So the audio is, okay. Second time in a row that we're having audio issues. Sounds like that's a Periscope issue. So the point being that I don't like conspiratorial thinking in general. I don't like conspiratorial thinking. I don't like people who approach things in that way. But the way that I think what happened here is I think there is a very simple and elegant explanation for what Jeffrey Epstein was doing that is actually a better explanation than the publicly available facts. So people are, yeah, a lot of trolls apparently. So the first basic point, the story that people would like to tell you is that Jeffrey Epstein was a hedge fund manager, right? That Jeffrey Epstein was running a hedge fund and that's where he got his money. And there's stories to that effect. I don't think that's really what the hedge fund was. Because when I read, there was an old 2002 story that I read, and this is, I had heard some people talking about how they had never worked with Epstein, they'd never done a trade with him. And then I read this particular article from New York Magazine back in 2002, and it talks about what Epstein's hedge fund was like. And it says things like, quote, "From the get-go, his business was successful, but the conditions for investing with Epstein were steep. He would take total control of the $1 billion. Again, $1 billion is apparently the minimum to invest. Charge a flat fee, and assume power of attorney to do whatever he thought was necessary to advance his client's financial cause. Power of attorney to do anything. No investment strategy. Just here, have my money and do whatever you want with it. Huh. And he remained true to the $1 billion entry fee, according to people who knew him. If you were worth $700 million and felt the need of the services of Epstein & Co., you would receive a not so polite no thank you from Epstein, turning down $700 million for a hedge fund." So to kind of give you an idea of what the kind of money people can make in hedge fund world, a very common arrangement in hedge fund world is something called 2 and 20, which is that to get the services of a hedge fund, you have to pay 2% of the entire assets under management and 20% of any gains on the year. So there's a performance incentive in the form of 20% of the gains, but a default 2%. So to understand what that means in the context of a $700 million potential investment in a hedge fund, that means 2% of that indicates a yearly revenue of roughly, what is that? I would say $14 million. That's the bare minimum. They're just $14 million just for holding on to the money. And then in addition to that guaranteed $14 million in yearly revenue, you could expect to take 20% of something that should average anywhere between like on average 8 to 9% yearly return. So 20% of that's another 2% on top. So we're talking just from that one client about 35 million in year, anywhere from like 25 to 35 million a year in revenue. And you're not going to take that money? What? That makes no damn sense. Other things that make no sense in this world. So he runs a lean operation, and those close to him say that his actual staff number around 150, and they're purely administrative. When it comes to putting these billions to work in the markets, it is Epstein himself making all the investment calls. There are no analysts or portfolio managers, just 20 accountants to keep the wheels greased and a bevy of assistants, many of them conspicuously attractive young women, to organize his hectic life. Hectic life. He has a hectic life where, and now we know he was like committing statutory rape 3 times a day. A hectic life, and also blackmailing people. And so, but he was really a hedge fund manager. It's like, no, that doesn't make sense. And so my theory was, pretty quickly, that basically this is all just a very complicated high-level blackmail scheme, and that the hedge fund was just a front. And there's a guy who wrote a really good thread called Quantian, you can follow him on Twitter, QUANTIAN1, and he came to a very similar conclusion seeing all these facts. And he talked about, like, if your starting points are 1, you're a committed pedophile, 2, you're connected to wealthy people, which is again something I realize, like, I've seen a whole bunch of people saying, like, oh, it's a conspiracy, it's Mossad, it's the Jews, all sorts of silly shit. It's like, no. He worked at Bear Stearns. So maybe he wasn't successful, but he would have had a little bit of money, and he would have connections in high society. And so if he was already a pedophile, one assumes he probably was at that point, he's a pedophile, committed, and he's got connections in high society, then he's got entree to do exactly what he wants to do. So when he says, wouldn't people stay away from him if he was blackmailing? Well, that goes to the next point. So he says, first, you throw parties, right? You already have access to young underage women. You throw parties with politicians and artists. You pay for them. You have a nice place. You throw parties. And then you wait for, like somebody to get handsy with an underage girl, and all of a sudden, bam, you've got blackmail over them. And if you've gotten, think about this. Imagine what you're able to do the moment you get blackmail over your first billionaire. So it looks like the very first person that may have been the mark of Jeffrey Epstein with this guy, Leslie Wexner, who runs like CEO of Abercrombie and Fitch, worth about $4.7 billion or something. Because that's the guy who somehow, I think somebody was reporting that Epstein had power of attorney over some of Wexner's assets, and that's how he forced Wexner to buy him a beautiful house in Manhattan. I mean, again, think about it. Power of attorney over one billionaire. If you have blackmail over one billionaire, kind of life-ending blackmail, like evidence of them committing statutory rape, like that's enough to give you all the seed capital you need. Like, you just pull it off once, you're good. So assuming you got that, then you've got seed capital for all further blackmail. And so what is the basic structure of this? And this is where Quantian made a really good point. I thought the hedge fund was a front completely, but he actually made the point about how the hedge fund wasn't just a front, it was a useful way to actually facilitate blackmail. So here's the basic way you do it. Like, okay, you blackmailed a billionaire, and you're saying, well, you now need to pay me a few $100 million. Well, somehow that would raise questions. Like, if you just suddenly had a few $100 million show up in your account as like a random dude in the street, obviously. And so what do you do in that case? Well, this is the point that Quantian makes. He makes a very good point. Instead of just taking $100 million, instead say, well, how about you invest in my hedge fund? Invest that money in my hedge fund, and I'll pay you. You'll pay 2 and 20, and that will raise no alarm bells with people, because everybody thinks I'm a wealthy financier anyway, right? I used to work at Bear Stearns. I set up a hedge fund. Not unthinkable that I would be making this kind of money. Hedge fund managers do it all the time. So that's the new structure. Like, instead of paying me a full outright bribe, you just invest in my hedge fund, a lot of money, and give me power of attorney so I can do whatever I want with it. Like, that was the thing that blew my mind. Power of attorney. Like, what? No. Rich people do not just give random hedge funds expansive power of attorney to do whatever they want with their money. It's not a thing. Like, they have like clawback provision. There's all sorts of other provisions contractually. The idea that they would just be like, oh, here, have $1 billion and you can do whatever the fuck you want with it, pardon my language, and I can't do anything about it. Like, no, they don't do that. So basically, I think this was a complicated blackmailing operation. And people are also saying, like, well, then he must have gotten the money from somewhere. It's like, no. If the dude had enough pull and sway to potentially have blackmailed a royal and an ex-president, he's always going to be rolling in dough. He's never going to run out of money. Never. Think about all the money that Bill Clinton could pull in over the course of 15 years. I bet a bunch of that money eventually ended up in the hands of Jeffrey Epstein, because Jeffrey Epstein had blackmail material on him. That's my guess. Also, it's just like one of the few ways you can stay safe, right? Like, the more people you blackmail, in some sense, the safer you are. Because if it really is as life-ending as I think it would be for many of these people, I mean, if you're a serious, high-level person, powerful person, influential person, and somebody has a video of you committing statutory rape, like, what wouldn't you do to make that go away and to keep that quiet? And also, I think this is the simplest explanation. It doesn't require there to be some shadowy person behind the scenes or some shadowy government. Like, one, Jeffrey Epstein was very, very reckless when you think about it in terms of like his own personal behavior. So even in a world where governments would consider doing something as appalling and contemptible as this, like literally using child sex slaves to blackmail people, that's, to me, that already strikes me as just insane and beyond the pale. But would you do it with a person like Epstein, who then would go publicly fly around the world with Bill Clinton? Like, you would keep it quiet. You wouldn't, because you wouldn't want it to get out yourselves that you hadn't been doing it, right? Like, you'd want it to stay, everything, you'd be like, everything needs to stay a complete secret. Somebody says, CIA does this all. I do not believe you do. The idea that CIA, like, participates in child sex trafficking, or that anything else participates in, it's just dumb. So Chaplain Steve says, Madoff made false monthly statements. Yeah, here's another tell. This was another point that he made. Hedge funds normally have letters and results that go out on a quarterly basis. That's very common, right? They send out, here's how we did, here's what investments of ours performed well, here's what didn't, here's your performance in your account. Nothing like that ever happened, right? Nothing ever leaked. And if Epstein ever did it, it never leaked, right? Like for other hedge funds like David Greenhorn, I forget his exact name, but he runs this Greenlight Capital. And if you actually read his letters come out every month. Hugh Hendry and other hedge fund managers' letters come out every month explaining how they did, why they did what they did, etc. So, it just doesn't, that part really doesn't make sense. And the real answer is, again, this wasn't a hedge fund. In reality, Epstein was just holding these guys' money hostage. Like, he's like, oh yeah, I'm taking a nominal fee. But he was just super wealthy because he had blackmailed some of the wealthiest people in the world in a way that they could never get back at him, and they would do anything to protect himself. And like, I've seen some people say like, well, then why wasn't Epstein killed? It's like, because he has a dead man switch. If you're blackmailing people, like, there's no way he didn't protect himself. Like, he's just like, look, if you are blackmailed, I've got you. You cannot let this information get public, or you will go to jail, and you will never be in public life again. Like, clearly. So I think a lot of people are scared right now because they've been blackmailed by Epstein, and now Epstein is in the government hands. I think that this is, that explains it. Somebody says, you can't write this stuff? Yeah, it's wild. Right. Yeah, it's like he just ran a blackmailing operation. Like, that's what happened here. It feels like it's in everybody's interest who's been blackmailed to keep it a secret that they've been blackmailed. It's not like the David Letterman thing where it's like, oh, I had an affair. Like, it's one thing to have it revealed that you have an affair. It's another thing entirely to reveal that you committed statutory rape. Like, there's some blackmail that doesn't work because they would rather reveal it, right? The victim of the blackmail would rather reveal the truth than allow you to continue blackmailing them. But with statutory rape, that's not a thing. Like, Garen, that's not a thing. They're willing to keep it. Somebody says, did I see Bill Clinton's statement? Yes, it would be the first time ever that Bill Clinton lied. Because Bill Clinton does not lie. Bill Clinton is an extremely honest man. Extremely honest. No, he's not extremely honest. He was disbarred for perjury. It's not extremely honest. Yeah. So, that's what I think. Like, somebody says, no way Bill Clinton going down? I don't know, man. I don't know. Somebody says, you doubt anything? No. At this point, it's too big to fail, right? The prosecution is a little too big to fail now. Like, think about it. It was kind of quiet. It was hush-hush a little bit. Like, I didn't hear about it. It didn't make major news. It's not hush-hush anymore. It was the daily news cycle. Like, SDNY does this knowing they need to be above board. They gave it to the public integrity section. Like, Epstein is going to he's going to cut a deal that involves naming other people. Basically, he has to cut a deal that SDNY can walk into a press conference and justify now. Like, this is not justified to the entire country. The entire public is focused on this. The ability to do shady deals in the shadows is really getting eliminated. Like, think about like how badly the Jussie Smollett thing went, and the fact that it's getting reopened, and the fact that Kim Foxx is getting investigated. Like, this is like a Jussie Smollett level case, and it's the Southern District of New York. It's just, I don't see it. I actually think this will work. Somebody says, Epstein is going to name a bunch of people and mysteriously commit suicide with a double tap. That's a funny idea. Yeah. Somebody says, is SDNY hoping to tie Trump will ignore other Dems? I don't think so. I don't think Jeff Berman is that hostile to Trump at the end of the day. I think they just want to go where the evidence leads. Dudes, it sounds like it just got to the point where, people at SDNY who didn't owe anything to Epstein were saying like, dude's a pedophile. Why are we not arresting him? We can. So, Will he get out on Thursday? I don't think he'll get bail. I think he'll be held. I do not think he will get bail. Somebody says Epstein wasn't the mastermind. He most definitely was protected by very high-level people. I don't know why people are saying that, right? Like, this is the kind of conspiratorial thinking I talk about that I really dislike, where people look at, everybody says about Epstein, brilliant guy, right? Super smart, you know, like high-level, extremely good at math. He had one of the things he was doing for PR was having like mathematicians and scientists like in his circle so that he looked like this like benefactor of whatever, like, and everybody said he was brilliant and capable of dealing with math and science at a really high level. So, very, very smart guy, right? Committed pedophile, total sociopath. And you're telling me it's like, oh no, there has to be somebody behind him. It couldn't have been him. Like, why not? Why couldn't it have been him? Clearly very, very, very smart, competent guy in his own way at this horrifying thing. But the idea that there has to be like some shadowy force behind him is just conspiratorial thinking, and you don't have evidence for it, right? Like, think about what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, I'm going to publicly available evidence, like the articles that were written about Epstein back in 2002 and others, and I'm saying, like, this is the most likely explanation of this set of facts that is simple. When you say, oh, there's this shadowy force behind him, it's like, why? Which one? How do you know? Or like, what is the evidence that there is one, other than just your thinking that he couldn't have done it on his own, which he could have, because he's smart. And like, I mean, again, think about it. Like, you blackmail you get one person on this. Like, say you're desperate for money, or you just got fired from Bear Stearns, but you run these parties and you know that you can get one person on. You get one person blackmailed to a point that they have to give you that money, and that one person is a billionaire. You're in business, right? You're in business. That's your seed capital for any business you want to start. That's $15 million a year in seed capital for your blackmailing business. You can start and then you can just do the whole thing. And again, like, why would a government, like, governments are slow, bureaucratic. There's lots of people, there's tons of whistleblowers. Like, you can't count on a government to keep something like this secret. A government would never do it. They're so, like, any sort of serious intelligence officer would put a kibosh on this kind of scheme with this kind of guy, with this many people. You know, like, just, it would just not be something that a smart intelligence agency would do, even if it were completely amoral. You know, it's one thing to have your own operations where you get compromised, and that was clearly done in the Cold War, but it's another thing entirely to, like, run with a, like, serial pedophile agent who's, like, publicly hobnobbing around the world with Prince Andrew and Bill. Like, why? Right? Like, that's just insane. And I mean, the simplest explanation is he was just a blackmailer using this to make money. Right? Yeah, like, it's the kind of thing that if any government were involved, it would have leaked a million years ago. It would have leaked. It's not, you can count on the fact that governments weren't involved because it stayed so secret. Like, and that it wasn't, and it stayed secret despite the fact that he got caught publicly paying for sex, right? Like, again, think about how secret it stayed. It stayed secret, effectively, right, without being prosecuted, despite the fact that Epstein himself went out there and, like, publicly just committed prostitution and got caught and, like, somehow got off, right? Like, and nobody still spilled the beans from inside the circle because they're petrified. They're just all blackmailed. All these people are just blackmailed by Jeffrey Epstein. Yeah, maybe you shouldn't sleep with kids, obviously, but the idea that it's just I hate the conspiratorial thinking. I hate it. Yeah, somebody said Israel's behind it. It's the dumbest thing ever. It's just the most horribly anti-Semitic, stupid thing. And if you actually read the current Israeli press, Netanyahu's using this stuff against Ehud Barak, right? This isn't a like Israel and the Jews collectively thing. This is a, like, Ehud Barak, who was friends with Bill Clinton and probably hung out with Jeffrey Epstein, has a personal exposure to the blackmail issue, probably, and might well be a black target of the blackmail. But like, the idea that, like, somehow Mossad was trying to, like, control Ehud Barak through Jeffrey, I'm like, what? It's just so silly. No. Like, why? Not a thing. Yeah, Ehud is screwed, Clinton is screwed, Prince Andrew is screwed. Somebody says, how did Epstein avoid not being suicidal long ago? Dead man switch, right? People are like, why did nobody kill Epstein? This man is a smart man. I'm certain when he decided to go about on a serial campaign of blackmailing the most famous and powerful men in the world, that he thought, what if the most famous and powerful men in the world try and have me killed? I don't know. Maybe I should preclude that from happening by having a dead man switch. Just a thought. Like, gosh, like assume this guy is fairly intelligent, right? He's reckless and a little crazy, but assume that he is smart enough to have thought about the potentiality of one of his blackmail victims trying to kill him. Like, come on, guys. Come on. Somebody says, so his whole income was based on blackmail, no hedge funds. That's what it looks like, right? Like, real hedge fund managers don't turn away $700 million investments. It's not a thing. It's not a thing. They don't do that. Real hedge fund managers don't be like, I have 150 staff, but they're all admin, and I make every single investing decision on my own. That's not what real hedge fund managers do. They have teams of people coming up with interesting investing ideas, because you can't find every interesting investing idea that'll get you off on your own. You just can't do it. You're not some wizard. You just like, oh yeah, totally doing it myself. No, it's the front. The hedge fund was a perfect front. He had worked in high finance. It wasn't inconceivable that a man like him would end up running a hedge fund. And then it was a perfect front for, bribes. Like, don't pay me a bribe, invest in my hedge fund and pay me a 2 and 20 fee for me putting your money in the S&P 500 or something silly like that, right? Like, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take your $100 million, I'm going to put it in an S&P 500 index fund, and I'm going to take 2%. Like, genius. Brilliant bribe mechanism. Yeah. So, yeah, I just think, yeah, exactly. It's like, it's a perfect blackmailing operation. Somebody says, why inaction by DOJ for so long? Originally probably blackmail, and then just no one was into it. Again, think about it, right? Like, Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State under the Obama administration, and Hillary Clinton was going to be the presumptive nominee. You think Obama's DOJ was ever going to be allowed to touch Epstein? No, they were not. They were not going to be allowed to touch Epstein because it would have been a massive scandal for Bill Clinton. Like, which probably still is going to be. Like, everybody's like, oh, this is going to get Trump. It's like, no, I don't think it's going to get Trump. It might get Alex Acosta, Secretary of Labor, will have to explain what he did, but, like, why wasn't this dealt with? And here's the thing, also, it's not like it was kind of probably pushed back on Republicans. Remember, I actually wanted to look up, when was Dennis Hastert Speaker of the House? I want to look this up. Like, Dennis Hastert was a pedophile. He was also the United States Speaker of the House for the Republican Party. He was Speaker of the House from 1999 to 2007. Oddly enough, the exact time that Jeffrey Epstein was active. Mind blown, right? Shockingly, there are some Republican pedophiles, too, who also probably used their own power to, like, preclude prosecution. Like, no kidding. Yeah, imagine my shock. Totally. Like, yeah. Like, when you think about it, if you think about it, it actually is a fairly elegant way to get really rich. Like, if you are in a position where, one, you're a pedophile and you have access to young women, to girls, to children, but you have access to children. Two, you have access into high society and the wealthiest people in the world. Three, you, like, are capable of throwing the parties necessary and bringing the people to, like, make it possible to catch people. And four, you're completely immoral and willing to blackmail people. Like, you can make shit, like, when you think about it as a business model, it makes a lot of sense. Like, that's really effective blackmail material. Video evidence of somebody committing statutory rape, that is effective blackmail material. Like, it's horrible, but that's certainly what it is. Like, that, that's not blackmail material that people will not pay you for. Right? Yeah, it's like, as Ian says, it's a great business model for unbelievably criminal, immoral, ethical people. Yeah, videos, right? That's basically the concept. Somebody says, who invested with Epstein? That's a real question, right? Who invested? Who was blackmailed by Epstein? So, somebody says, are the crimes in the U.S. same as if in his island? Yes, I think so, because his island is in the U.S. Virgin Islands. What did he do in Africa with Clinton? I don't know, hobnob around? Good question. Somebody says, what about James Comey's daughter on the defense mortgage? I don't see it as corruption. James Comey's relationship to Clinton is tenuous. He was just a U.S. attorney. The idea that they would be even half, like, I just don't see that level of corruption. Like, I see Comey as corrupt for his own purposes because he just really hated Trump and wanted to, elevate his own status. So I saw him working with this clique, but I don't think there's like some grand conspiracy on the part of James Comey to protect pedophiles or anything, which is why the daughter doesn't make sense. So he says, your shirt is giving us a headache. It's too bad because it's fire. If you like this shirt, Amazon Good Threads. Somebody says, this stuff blows me away. It's so corrupt and slimy. I'm appalled by it all. Like, it's weird to look at it and think, but, you know, I'm not just seeing me. Like, Nassim Taleb, this guy Josh Brown who writes about finance. Like, everybody who looks at this realize, like, who knows anything about the hedge fund world and finance is like, this is not a hedge fund. This is not how hedge funds act. Like, hedge funds being like, oh yeah, like, Jeff's just a genius and makes all the decisions himself. And he only deals with clients who give him at least $1 billion. He turns away $700 million in assets. Oh, and, you know, what else does he do? Oh, he never reveals his client list. It's all offshore in the Virgin Islands. He never sends out any letters or revenue streams. Nothing ever leaks. Like, it's not a hedge fund. It's a hostage situation. It's just a blackmailing operation. Ghislaine Maxwell was part of the it's just a blackmailing operation. Like, that's already complicated enough. Why does it need to be more complicated? It's just a high-level blackmailing operation. It's all it was. It's all it ever was, is my guess. I don't think Epstein & Co. was ever a serious hedge fund. Maybe in the first year, and then just had a bad year, and then he's like, well, better start blackmailing people, because otherwise I'm going to go broke. Like, it's just a high-level blackmailing operation. But it's fascinating that it is a high-level blackmailing operation. You know, it doesn't, but that's the thing. Like, what is the simplest explanation of the facts? Not what might be true, not what is my pre-existing bias. What is the simplest explanation of the fact that this hedge fund behaved completely bizarrely, and at the same time we see all this evidence of him talking with Bill Clinton and Prince Andrew and all these people, and somehow he gets off, you know, he's a pedophile, he's super reckless about it, but somehow avoids prosecution for it. Like, he's just blackmailing everybody. That's the business model. Why would you run a hedge fund if you could blackmail people, right? Like, if you're assuming you're amoral enough to be a pedophile, right? You're amoral enough to be a pedophile, but you're going to be morally righteous enough to actually make money the old-fashioned way? No. Like, I don't think that makes sense. Go away, Ricky. All right, I feel like I'm just repeating myself now. So I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for watching. Barbara hand corner screen. Follow button. Will Chamberlain on Twitter. Will Chamberlain on Periscope. Peace.